Welcome to the one and only Interior Design Book Podcast, Decorating by the Book, hosted by Suzy Chase from her dining room table in New York City. Join Suzy for conversations about the latest and greatest interior design books with the authors who wrote them.
Hello, I'm Hilary Robertson, creative director, author, editor. My most recent book is called Nomad at Home, which designing the home where traveled is the tagline, which we'll be talking about. I'm from London, but I lived in America for 17 years. I live in Brooklyn and Hudson.
When I first cracked open this book, I assumed it was all about decorating your home with finds from around the world. But it's so much more than that. I really love your philosophy of the levers. Can you chat a little bit about that and how it's really the centerpiece of Nomad at Home?
Well, I've always been very curious about living in other places ever since I was a child. My parents are both academics, so we had long vacations and we would go away for all of those. And a lot to France, actually, because that's so near England. But I always imagined myself in those places. I couldn't help doing that. And I grew up learning languages, so that also reinforced that idea that one day perhaps I could live somewhere else. I know that not everyone does that, especially now that I have lived in America for so long, and I go back and see my friends who live in the same house, live in the same town, and their lives have developed and moved on, but they clearly are happy to do their developing in the same context, whereas I always want that friction of being somewhere else. That's, I think, what it is. It's a kind of friction that helps you grow in some way. But some people just don't need that. So I'm a leaver, not a remainer.
I've always wondered if people could really develop if they were a remainer, if they stayed in that house they grew up in.
I think they do. It's just a slower process. It's more of an Ann Tyler type of a process, if you know what I mean. I always think in her novels, they're very based in a town, in a place, and things move and change, but in a different way. I think you're putting yourself in a crucible when you take off to somewhere else. So it's more extreme. I like to speak other languages, and I like that discovery process. I'm also completely in love with cities. Cities are like, people for me. They're like getting to know a new friend, and maybe it's not always comfortable, but a friend that sort of pushes you and changes you somehow.
When people write books, they normally have an audience, a reader in mind. Who did you write this book for?
Gosh, that's so fun. I think people who like to travel and people who, like me, will immediately go to the real estate office and press their nose against the window looking at houses in Tuscany or Puglia or Madrid, apartments in Parma. I just can't help it. I consider all of those options. If I like somewhere, I always have to imagine, where could I live here? Maybe it's a lot of dreaming, not necessarily something you may end up doing. That's the designing the home more traveled part of it, I think.
Yeah, dreamers. And you talk about otherness a lot in the book. How has that always attracted you?
I do have a brother. He's 6 years younger than me, but I was an only child, for 6 years. I think that only child experience basically meant that I was having to play games with myself and have imaginary lives, and that's always been very important to me. So I think having those experiences of being in another country and being different, somehow that was a default setting for me. I think I wrote about it in the book, but I went to stay with my mother's pen friend from when she was a child, her French pen friend. I stayed with their family in France, which wasn't really that much fun, but it was interesting. I guess I just learned to rely on myself, but also to be an observer. And I enjoyed that. To me, I don't really want to fit in. I just want to go and look and, absorb what's around me.
I love the fact that you don't want to fit in, because I don't want to fit in either. But with the internet, with Instagram, I feel like it's encouraging all of us to be the same, look the same, like the same things.
I totally agree. I can't bear it, actually. That's the antithesis of, what I want to do and how I want to live. But it's worrying to me, especially in the work that I do, being on trend. And I think that gets narrower and narrower, especially in America, because I think, England is an eccentric place, and we're known for eccentricity when it comes to fashion and music and all sort of creative fields. But I think America can be very trend driven, and especially because you have these dominant retailers who will be selling a look. That look will dominate the marketplace. And because independent retail is so threatened by huge rents here, there's so little of it. I mean, I find LA much more inspiring for independent retailers, smaller retailers in design and interiors. So I feel that it's very, very difficult to be different. If you want to work in the fields that I work in, I love to morph and to change, and I like to soak it all in and try it out. That's the job that magazines used to do so brilliantly, is to go to all the shows, and be it Milan or Paris, and to come back and bring the trend and interpret it for the reader. I think that's what I'm doing in my books, because magazines just don't really do it anymore.
In the book, you talked about when you decorate your homes, you turn your gaze towards somewhere else. I'm so curious about how your mother decorated.
Oh, well, she did that too, in a sense. I mean, she grew up in, I suppose she was born in 1933. She was definitely a modernist. And my father, he was a geographer, but he studied in Finland, Norway, and Denmark. So he very much liked Danish design. And so my parents, that's what they started with. They bought nearly everything in our house was Scandinavian. And that continued with me, because I actually studied in Denmark and lived in Denmark. So that feels very natural to me. Even though I wrote this book called Monochrome Home, I think a lot of people assume that I don't like color, but I really do like color. But I want to do all of it. That's the stylist in me. I can't really help it.
Would you say it's calming, the colors that you're so sort of attracted to?
Absolutely. Yeah. I went to Tangier recently, and I was in the house of decorator Gavin Horton, and his house is all red and green and primary colors and cleverly put together, very sophisticated, uses stripes a lot, super fun. I mean, I absolutely loved being in it. But I think, what Leanne Ford does with white is also, that's a really clever way of editing out choices. There are so many choices. The Monochromatic Palette that is also very calming, and also it's easy to unite a lot of things if you like things from different periods. Or minimalism. White can kind of deal with all of that.
Okay, you just brought up Leanne Ford, and she wrote the most thoughtful foreword. I truly think Hilary Robertson is one of the greatest stylists, editors, and curators of our time. And don't even think about taking that line out, Hilary. That was the nicest thing I've ever read.
No, so sweet. She's the best. Yeah, we're about to go to Copenhagen together to 3 days of design, which is going to be so fun. We haven't been able to go to a design show together, and I can't wait to show her Copenhagen. But yes, that is the kindest and sweetest. And she found my book, my monochrome book, and then reached out to me. So it was very fun it's very nice to connect with people over a book. I love that. Something that you've made. You don't know who's going to find it, who it's going to resonate with. And, we make this magazine feel free together now as well.
So you tell us color is a personal matter, and finding our palette is an intuitive process. What are some steps we can take to discover our palette?
I think most color schemes probably need 3 colors. I mean, or if I was doing a neutral room, maybe I'd be playing with like 4 different intensities and then varying the textures. It could be anything. It could be a stone. It could be pebbles you saw on the beach. Just training your eye to notice colors that you respond to or combinations that you respond to.
One wanderer in the book I'd love for you to chat about is Liselotte. Is that how you pronounce her name?
Oh, Liselotte.
And
yes.
Her story had me at leaving Sweden for Texas at 17 with no money and no plan. That's crazy.
So brave. I know. But actually, weirdly, I meet a lot of expats here, and a lot of them left England very young and just on a whim, and then sort of just figured it out, which is incredible to me. So it's extraordinary. She's so brave. But now in Italy, I think she's really hit her stride as a painter, because now she's not really making products so much or illustrating for brands. She's working as a fine artist, but she's doing a series at the moment where when she travels, she picks up like a favorite novel, whether it's Bonjour Tristesse, she posted recently, and then she does a little. I think she frames the book, and then she made a painting sort of inspired by the book. I love all her references. All her references make so much sense to me. And interestingly, her color palette has become more muted in her paintings. But I think it's fascinating to see how artists develop. She talked to me a lot about how she lived in Rome, how to connect with the people. You always say hello to everyone, to your neighbors. It's the opposite of New York, where everyone kind of scuttles past each other looking at the ground. It was interesting. Actually, now she's moved to Tuscany. I'm longing to see her new home. That's the great thing. Some of the people in my previous books I've sort of followed to new homes, so I always like to see how they develop. There's a chapter in the book, Less is More, about the Moors who live in Mallorca now, and I'm hoping to shoot that house for my next book. Well, they're minimalist, but every time I go to a new house of theirs, there's less things in it, which is really funny. They're just paring down and paring down and paring down.
Is it a style thing? Are their kids going off to college? Why are they paring down?
No, I think it's just that's how their taste is evolving. They're doing more with texture and less with things. I think that's a trend at the moment, I would say. So it's about the textures and about understanding, I call it the envelope of the room. So every surface is something that has character, but in a very simple way. It's minimalism, but minimalism works when there's texture. I think the cornerstone of minimalism is really attention to the shape of the room, the window, the light that comes in, and lack of distractions. I think
Yes.
that sort of peaceful quality. I'm not. I'd love to be a minimalist. I'm not, because I like things and I'm a magpie. But I admire people who are able to pare down in that way.
Me too. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
More is more with me. But yes, I have so much admiration for people, especially in their bedroom. It's just a bed in their bedroom.
How do they do that?
I don't know. It's lovely.
I know. I have all the different, sleep aids and piles of books, and it's ridiculous. Yeah, I don't know how anyone does that. They must just live in a completely different way. It'd be fun to observe them, to follow them around and see where they keep everything.
So before we go, I would love for you to tell me what this line means to you. To travel, hopefully, is a better thing than to arrive.
Well, many years ago, when I was just in my 20s, a very good friend of mine called me Hilary Traveling Hopefully. I think identifying my attitude to life. And I guess not much has changed. I think it's just that maybe it's about restlessness and curiosity and being a lever that's just in one's blood, just the sort of the search for something. And maybe that occasionally you attain the feeling that you're after. I can get that swimming in the Aegean or momentarily somewhere. But I'm always looking for my forever home. I don't know where it is yet. I mean, I do feel very English for sure, but I don't know where I'll arrive, if I'll ever arrive. So maybe I just have to be happy with that.
Where can we find you on the web and social media?
On social media, I'm at Hilary Robertson, and I have an Instagram for the book, which is at NomadatHomeBook. And then I'm HilaryRobertson.com for my website.
This has been so fascinating, Hilary. Thanks so much for coming on Decorating by the Book podcast.
Thank you so much. It's really fun to talk about it. Thank you for all your observations. I really enjoyed it.
Follow Decorating by the Book on Instagram. And thanks for listening to the one and only interior design book podcast, Decorating by the Book.